special event called Building the New IT with Cloud and SaaS. We're excited to present Seth Robinson today, who's the Senior Director of Technology Analysis for CompTIA. And this is Dina Moskowitz, CEO of SaaSmax here, hosting the event, and excited to bring this program to all of you, including those of you who are part of the SaaSmax community. I'm going to give you a real brief overview of SaaSmax and then pass the torch and introduce Seth, who's going to then talk about the primary topic. Just for those of you who don't know what SaaSmax is but came to the event based on the topic, we're the B2B SaaS marketplace for the channel. And our goal is to accelerate sales transactions through multiple ways. One is through our online marketplace platform, where we enable our SaaS vendors to list their products as well as reseller programs to make it easy for resellers to identify. We do quality matchmaking, where we introduce vendors and resellers to create more quality relationships. We now have a reseller portal as a service. We now license to our SaaS vendors who don't have their own reseller portal to enable them to accept deal registration, reseller registration, and to have all the templates they need to have a world-class reseller portal. We do education and awareness and enablement, much like what we're doing today, but also on behalf of SaaS vendors introducing products to our reseller community. And we have channel and SaaS expertise, over 150 years we calculated when we add up our team, and are able to really help our vendors as well as resellers to bridge the gaps and cross the chasm, as we like to say. And then we have our Why SaaS news blog, which does our best to highlight and capture some of what's going on in the channel and in SaaS. And tomorrow our goal really is to be the head of global distribution of SaaS for the channel. Right now, this is just an example of some of the apps that are listed in SaaSmax who have channel programs. The latest ones we had since November 1 to join include really eight nice ones, including Expensify, FE ERP, SoftFront, NetDispatcher, Cloudy Assurance, DemoChimp, Cirrus Insights, and VX Suite. And each one has a profile on the marketplace already. And for resellers, it's free to join. And oftentimes the vendors are giving discounted pricing plans as well as special commissions and incentives to SaaSmax members, and et cetera. So feel free to check it out. And without further ado, I wanted to present our guest of honor, Seth Robinson. Again, he's a Senior Director of Technology Analysis for CompTIA. And he's been with CompTIA for over 4 years and is based in Chicago. And his goal really is to analyze the IT trends in the sector and provide insight into trend drivers and future direction. Some of his background is that he's led research studies on cloud computing, mobility, big data, IT security, etc. And he's spent over 10 years in processor development at IBM, building chips for the Xbox 360, the PS3, and the Wii. He's been cited in a lot of different media outlets, including the Wall Street Journal and USA Today, for his thoughts. And so he's a great guest for us to have. He gets what's going on in the channel and SaaS, and we're excited to present to you the information that he's been researching specifically on the new IT and SaaS. So welcome, Seth.
Thanks a lot, Dina. And just one note, I'm not seeing the slides advance, but if that's just on my end, then I can keep an eye on my local copy. Oh, I think, there we go. Okay, I think I'm seeing them now. So, all right, if we're ready to go then let me explain just a little bit about CompTIA. For anyone that isn't familiar with us, we are the Global IT Trade Association, and our goal is to be the voice of the IT industry. And we do that through several different avenues. One is our membership, and SaaSmax is one of our members. We do a lot with them, and they do a lot with us. And we're pleased to collaborate with them and understand more about the marketplace, and then also bring some of the benefits that we can to them. Most people know CompTIA through certification. And certification is a huge thing that we try to do for the IT industry and IT professionals. And then education has been a focus area of ours for the past few years. It's one of the primary member benefits, and that's really where the research falls in. And then two other arms that we have are advocacy and philanthropy, both speaking up for the IT industry on Capitol Hill, and then looking for opportunities to bring people into the IT industry that have struggled to find jobs or that aren't really able to get some education elsewhere. We serve that through our philanthropic arm. So there's a lot of things that we do. We do have a premier membership arm as well as open access registered users on our website. So if you want to get onto the website and learn a little bit more about us and maybe see if membership would be for you, then I invite you to do that. So today, what we want to talk about is cloud computing. And before we get into the cloud computing section of it, where I'll be sharing some data from our latest study, I just wanted to take a quick look at the IT industry overall. I don't know everyone that's on this call, but I do know in the cloud space, there are a lot of new entrants and people that are probably trying to learn about, what does the overall industry look like. And this is a pretty good picture of where we are right now. We're kind of climbing towards a $4 trillion industry. And the really interesting part is that it's becoming more balanced across the globe. Whereas the US and Europe, Western Europe, and Asia Pacific used to really be the dominant forces there. Those are still the strongest forces, with Asia Pacific jumping up into that #2 spot, and now you have developing economies. And it's a really interesting situation because all of these countries are developing their IT kind of at different paces. And some of the more developed countries have legacy infrastructure that they have to worry about. Some of the developing countries are able to jump right into some of the new models and build their processes around those IT models without really having to worry about the legacy piece that they might have invested in. And so companies have an opportunity now to get their products and services out there, and the IT channel is the primary way that a lot of vendors work to get their products or services into the hands of the end user. This is a very simple description of the IT channel. Basically, it starts on the left-hand side with vendors of products and services. Traditionally, those vendors have worked through a distributor, and Dina described how they are aiming to become a distributor of SaaS solutions as one of the things that they want to do in this space. From the distributors, the final step before it gets to that end user has typically been a solution provider. So a local, sometimes a smaller, sometimes a larger company that's working with companies in a given region. And they are able to work with their clients, meet the IT needs, and get the products and services into their hands without the customer having to worry about all of that, and without the customer, in a lot of cases, having to have that technical knowledge. So you can see that estimates out there suggest that 75% of business for many IT vendors flows through this channel, with the other 25% being direct sales of some sort. And if we're looking at solution providers, it's a pretty big universe. There's about 120,000 firms that have payroll, about 350,000 people that are just self-employed, just a one-man shop doing IT work for small and micro businesses. And then the common target universe is usually cited around 75,000. Those are the firms that have some payroll, they've got some scale, they're able to do some purchasing, and it's the addressable audience. So again, this is just a very quick look at the infrastructure that there is out there, and the IT channel is really where CompTIA focuses with its membership. And so there's a lot of work that we do to describe these relationships and to describe the business models and to describe the way that things are transforming as something like cloud comes into the space. As far as partnering goes, when you get down to that leaf level and you've got these 75,000 plus partners that are looking to work with vendors and bring those vendors products and services to the market, that's been an area that's been in flux over the past few years and something that we've kept a close eye on. So in our latest study where we were looking at partnering, we saw that on average, channel partners belong to 8 vendor programs. They're not just married to a single vendor. They're really trying to bring some breadth to their customers and give them that freedom of choice. At the top end of that scale, 20% of channel partners say that they belong to more than 15 vendor programs. So some partners have a very wide portfolio, and they're constantly looking for more. We haven't asked the question, quite in this way since 2012, but back then, 43% of partners were reporting a net gain in their vendor program participation. And we know anecdotally that that is still churning and still rising slightly, and a lot of the churn and the gain is because of cloud solutions. Partners are looking for those vendors that can help them become more cloud-enabled. And so if you're a vendor on this call today, I think that's good news. I think that there are people out there looking for the new vendors in this new IT world, and it's just a matter of finding each other. And then the final thing that we have been talking about a lot when it comes to the channel is becoming hybrid and mixing products and services. I think when the channel got started, it was very product-based. People were reselling products, servicing products on kind of a break-fix relationship. And over time, that's transitioned, and people have explored new models. The latest one that a lot of people have been looking into is managed services, where they're trying to be a lot more proactive about the IT management of their clients. But you can see the wide variety of things that channel firms are offering in an attempt to, in some cases, be the IT department for their clients that may not have the resources or the technical skill in-house to really manage their own IT. And so this mix is changing. It's been moving more and more towards services over the past few years. And I think that this mix of products and services has interesting implications when you're talking about SaaS being the product and that cloud application being the thing that you're trying to bring to a customer, and what kind of maintenance, what kind of service would get wrapped around that. Those are some of the things that I think we'll touch on through the rest of the discussion here. So with that as the background, we're going to take a deeper look now at the cloud landscape. And like I said, we have just finished our 5th annual cloud study. We published that at the beginning of the month. If you go to our website and become a registered user, you can actually access that entire report for free. And so we'd invite you to do that. But we'll just walk through here and give a little bit of a look at what we're seeing happen in the cloud market. And it starts with the embracing of cloud that we're seeing. When we started the study 5 years ago, there was a fair amount of fear, uncertainty, and doubt in the marketplace, especially when it came to the channel. I think a lot of channel firms weren't quite sure how cloud solutions were going to fit into their portfolio, or if cloud vendors would be trying to go direct more than use the channel. From an end user perspective, which is what this chart is showing, people have certainly gotten over some of their initial fears when it comes to security or technical integration in the cloud. And if you look at the green bars, you can see that in 2012, that was more on the left-hand side. People didn't have that much of their architecture based in the cloud. It was less than 30% for half of the companies that we surveyed. And then as we've gone through the past 2 years, now you look at the dark blue bar in 2014, more than half of the sample is on the right-hand side of the chart, and they're saying that more than 30% of their infrastructure is cloud-based. And so we've certainly had people moving more and more into the cloud over the past 2 years. As they're moving into the cloud, these are the 3 models that have been defined, and these are the 3 models that most people would recognize as being in use. And you can see that software as a service is the leading model here. You do have plenty of companies playing around with infrastructure or platform as a service. That tends to be weighted a little bit more towards the larger companies, those companies that have pretty high infrastructure demands, that are looking for some more flexibility in their infrastructure. But even down at the SMB space, you've got companies that would look at a storage solution or try to do some kind of backup and disaster recovery. So those 2 are certainly working models, and a lot of people are looking at that. But working with a cloud application is the easiest entry point, and that's where a lot of people are starting, and it's where a lot of people are trying to expand their use of cloud resources. when we look at the types of firms that are using software as a service, there's a few things that we see when we try to segment these on the back end. First of all, 51% of small firms are using software as a service. And that's a pretty good number. Obviously, it leaves some room for growth here. There's some room for growth in all of these. And when you're considering small firms and the way that they're using software as a service or the way that they're using cloud computing, one of the benefits that we've been talking about for quite a while when it comes to the small firm is their ability to now get an application out of the cloud that they might not have been able to install before on some on-premise equipment. So now that application that lives out in the cloud might be a little bit more lightweight, the licensing around it might be a little bit more flexible, and small firms are now able to explore a larger world. They're able to explore new types of applications and strengthen their business. So this is an area of opportunity looking at small firms. The second one is those companies that claim to have low cloud usage, that say they're kind of just getting started. They haven't put a large percentage of their infrastructure into the cloud yet. 49% of those companies are using software as a service. And once again, there's a lot of headroom here. And these companies are likely going to be pushing more of their architecture into the cloud. And as they move more into the cloud and they're experimenting with different cloud models, they're going to be looking for the right applications too, and they're going to be looking for those applications that might serve them best in a cloud model versus those applications that might serve them best on-premise. And finally, the late cloud adopters, the ones that kind of sat on the sidelines, watched the landscape for a while, maybe answered some additional questions about security or things like that before they started engaging with a cloud provider. 37% of those are using software as a service. And so this one probably has the most headroom. And these companies right now are probably dabbling with different things. They're probably trying out a little bit of storage. They're probably maybe sometimes trying to spin up a virtual instance. But that software and that application is the one that's probably going to really accelerate their journey into the cloud. And so they are open to various opportunities that are out there, including the way that they can get their applications more cloud-based.
And you know, Seth, it's interesting because when you live and breathe in the SaaS world and in the IT world, you think that a lot more has already been adopted. So seeing these figures here at only 51% of small firms have it being adopted SaaS, I thought it was higher. And I think it really does show the great opportunities that exist out there still.
Yeah, and I think, you know, these are some of the areas where there's the most opportunity. You know, if you were to look at a large enterprise as opposed to a small firm, you would see some greater adoption. And I think that when you're in, you know, the industry, those large firms or those early adopters are the ones that are pushing the envelope, and they're the ones where the most learning is taking place and where some of the earliest case studies tend to come out. And so I think that does sometimes tend to give an impression that a lot of people are doing this. And, you know, we've seen it in our research. We also tend to forget sometimes that there's a pretty large tail of later adopters or smaller companies that are coming through and looking to adopt these things and probably looking for someone to partner with because one of the reasons that they were a little bit of a later adopter is they don't have the resources to be exploring this as aggressively.
Oh, exactly. I mean, we're finding, just seeing the apps that are joining SaaSmax every week, you know, field service applications and fleet management, customer support and help desk for different sectors. Things are getting more verticalized and getting more and more affordable for the smaller and mid-sized businesses as well. So it's really leveling the playing field.
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah, and this gives just an overview of all the different types of things that are out there. And this actually isn't all of the different types of things. It's just a sampling of them. But it gives you some sense of where people are going. And I don't think that it's too surprising to see something like business productivity or email at the top of the list. I think that those things have been cloud-based the longest, or you've got some examples that have been cloud-based, and people have been pushing into those for a little while. And then as you work down the list, you get into things like collaboration or virtual desktops that we see a lot of interest in, and also a lot of struggle to make it work right, even though some of the technical solutions are out there. Sometimes it's about changing behavior, and I think if you get into something like customer relationship or expense management or even an ERP system, and the way that you could maybe simulate an ERP system for a small business, you can put that solution in, but it's going to require some change to workflow as well, and it's going to require some change to behavior in the workforce, and so there's a lot of opportunity in some of these more complex or maybe more niche solutions to bring them to a wider market, but that opportunity probably also comes with some additional challenge in helping people understand how they can use this thing that they haven't been able to use before.
Right, and I think it also brings to light that for resellers, for solution providers and partners, that they can branch into new categories of IT to resell that are more line of business versus IT focused, and also to be aware that some new there are new types of partners out there that can be domain experts in some of these areas like HR and CRM and financial management. So it definitely sheds light on a broader scope of what the channel can grow into.
You're right, and your point about the line of business applications being of interest to some of these companies highlights the fact that in some cases it's going to be the line of business that might be the main purchaser. And we won't talk about it in a whole lot of depth here, but that line of business purchasing is one thing that we've looked at in our cloud study. And the fact that it's happening more and more, the fact that in some cases, a small number of cases is working around the IT department, and in a lot of other cases they're working with the IT department. It's a matter of making that relationship work and making sure that business is able to say, here's what we need for the business to run faster and smoother, and the IT team is able to say, here's what we need for security and reliability. And so I think that changes the discussion.
That's just a warning that your audio is a little bit shaky right now. I'm not sure if you...
Oh, sorry. I haven't moved, but let me know if it doesn't improve. I can always...
Okay, sounds a little better.
Okay. So I was just talking about the line of business being the purchaser here more, and that changes the discussion when a partner is engaging. So this is something that we've been seeing over the past 2 years that we've studied specifically. In the early days of cloud computing, when we were having discussions, we talked a lot about the move from an on-prem system to a public cloud provider. And there's a lot that goes into that move. But what we've been seeing over the past 2 years is these secondary movements. So once someone has made that initial migration into a public cloud provider, movements as well. And for various reasons, they might move from one public cloud into another. They might decide to build out their own private cloud infrastructure, or they might have a private cloud hosted for them, and they would move some applications into that. Or they might move some of their applications that they moved into the cloud back on-premise. And none of these are necessarily wholesale moves. They're not moving all of the architecture and infrastructure that they moved into the public cloud provider to these other models, but they're moving pieces, and they're moving those pieces where it makes sense. And so this opens up a lot of new challenges, I think. I think it opens up a challenge for managing this entire system when you might have things spread across different providers. It opens up a challenge for figuring out how are you going to optimize the application or the system that you're planning to use. Is it best suited in an on-premise system? Is it best suited for private cloud? Is it best suited for the public cloud? And then obviously, how do all of these things work together? So people are going to be making these moves more and more as they learn more about the cloud and as they learn more about their provider and more about what they want to do with their cloud applications. And so this is a very interesting thing that, again, we've watched happen over the past 2 years. And it's the type of thing that happens companies are getting more mature in their cloud adoption. So this is an adoption progression that we've built to describe how end users are moving into the cloud. And this is linear. It moves from left to right. People start with experiments, and they're just getting educated. They might do a proof of concept. They're not really doing business in the cloud yet. From there, they move to non-critical use. And they're going to take a system they use for business, but not one that's all that critical, or not one that holds the most sensitive data. And they're going to put that up into the cloud. When they do that, that's really when they learn about things like making that transition, or how do you integrate that system back to all the other systems that you have. As companies have been learning that, and we're seeing a lot of companies now learning those lessons and then moving into a full production stage where they are comfortable putting more critical business systems or more sensitive data out there. It still might not be the absolute most sensitive, and those are the things that we sometimes see moving back on-premise. But as they move into full production, now the overall business has to become cloud-enabled. And the challenges begin to shift from technical challenges into cultural and behavioral challenges as companies build their policies and procedures, and as they begin to experiment with provider switching. And then finally, companies move into a stage of transformed IT where cloud is really table stakes for them. It's just an assumed part of their infrastructure, and now they're re-architecting their applications to take advantage of that cloud infrastructure and those cloud resources. They're changing the way they do workflow. And this is an interesting spot because those companies that maybe have started up in the past 5 to 7 years might have come close to starting here. They maybe built out their infrastructure based on cloud solutions because it's the quickest way to get started. And so you've got some startups that are already living on the right-hand side of the chart, and then you have all of the other companies that we've been dealing with for a long time moving through this progression. And there are a lot of different challenges that come up in each stage. And the interesting thing that we found this year is the challenge that it is to move from stage to stage.
Right, and I think again this provides opportunity for partners, but it also provides an awareness to SaaS vendors that when they're dealing with growing their customer base, that by having partners in place to help with these transitions is something that really could be critical to the adoption and broader adoption of their application.
Yes, yeah, we're seeing end users begin to rethink the way they partner with IT providers. I think a lot of end users, have been used to a single provider and having a single, head on the horse when it comes to their IT needs. But increasingly, those IT needs are becoming complex, and so you've got someone that can come in and offer a point solution, and you've got someone that can do some type of lifecycle management. And that lifecycle management is really important when it comes to this cloud adoption progression. What this is showing here is that the progression gets harder the further you go. I think there might be a sense out there, especially among those people that are early into cloud adoption, that first transition is the hardest one. Once you've made a move into the cloud and you've moved a business system up and you've learned about migration and integration, then you've probably solved the majority of the problems, and it can be downhill from there. But in fact, what we found this year is that those companies that had progressed further, as they looked back and they rated the level of effort that went into the transition, that level of effort got harder. And you can see that those companies that had made it far enough to rate these things said that 28% of them said that the first transition required significant effort, 35% said that the second transition required significant effort, and then a whopping 63% said that that final transition required significant effort. And so I think this is great news, like Dina was saying, for those partners that want to engage over the long term, because it's not only about that first transition, and it's not only about getting them up and running with cloud, it's about managing it ongoing through the entire process. So for the channel, the big question has been, can you make money off of this? Going back to the concerns about cloud vendors going direct and the concerns about how cloud offerings were going to fit into a portfolio, this has been something that we've looked at very closely in the channel section of our study for a while now. And there's good news here. When we ask companies, channel companies, to compare their cloud offerings with their traditional offerings, because so many companies are offering these things side by side, the channel firms that we survey say that they find that their cloud offerings are growing revenue faster and their cloud offerings have wider profit margins. So there does seem to be a good opportunity to make money here, and I think that this is part of the reason that the channel has embraced the cloud so much, is that they've seen that it's a new model. There are certainly some new things to learn, but when it's handled the right way, it can be a very viable business model.
Absolutely, and I know that from the vendors in SaaS Max and the landscape that we can look across, we see that the commissions that are being offered and the special offers by vendors to resellers are extremely generous, and they're recurring for the most part. So it's a great opportunity to take on more products, whether they're passive or active installations, to earn more.
Yes, yeah, and I know that a lot of cloud vendors out there, I talk with several of them that are building their channel programs, and a lot of them don't have all that much experience with it, and so they're trying to build out the programs and figure out what are those best practices, and maybe even look for some innovative ways to build that relationship to make it a win for everyone, because they do want to work with the channel very much, and they're just looking for the best way to do that.
Exactly, and not to be an advertisement for SaaS Max, but that's one of the things that we focused on doing, is really helping the vendors who need to learn about and adopt and recruit resellers and build their programs. We help them do it a little more affordably and faster, and with some great streamlined tools and expertise. So we see a lot of that here.
Very good. Good. So this is another model that we built showing the different business models that channel firms might have. And so this sort of goes hand in hand with the adoption progression for end users, although this one is not linear. This is not something where a channel firm would enter on the left-hand side and move to the right. They could offer any number of these different models if it fits in with what they're doing. And so to give just a quick description of these, the build model is very hardware-based. I think the build model is one where you are trying to put in hardware and you're trying to build out that private cloud for your end user. And maybe you're building your own infrastructure and you're offering infrastructure or platform as a service. But the build model is the one that lines up the most with those channel firms that have kept a good hold on their hardware business and have some good hardware installation expertise. Moving on from that, the provide provision is kind of the reseller model. This is taking a cloud offering and white labeling it or reselling it as is. And so it's taking something like Microsoft Office 365 or any of the many SaaS applications that SaaS Max would have and getting that out to a larger audience and basically moving it through just as you would have a software product in the traditional channel. And so we see a lot of companies working with this model here because it's again one that they're familiar with from doing value-added reselling. The third model is enable or integrate, and this begins to be a little bit more of a service model in coming in and making sure that a SaaS application or even storage as a service or something like that is fully integrated into a company's business. And I've mentioned integration several times throughout the webinar. It's a challenge that we see constant across all of the adoption phases, where some of the other challenges may change depending on where a company is. We constantly see integration as a challenge, and so this is an area of great opportunity for the channel, just as it has been for a while with traditional integration projects. And then the final stage, or the final model, is the manage and support model, which lines up with the work that managed service providers are doing today and trying to be that life cycle manager and get that recurring support and also get that recurring revenue. Looking for a way to manage what is going to become the overall infrastructure and eventually manage that entire picture. And so these companies are working with their clients after they've gotten the cloud application installed and continuing that relationship and helping them to get the most out of it and making sure that it stays up and running.
Yes, we have an interesting question here.
Okay.
Jeff, can you hear me okay? So the question that we have is that migration and integration are the biggest fear factors that most have in embracing the cloud. Do you see the same?
We do see integration still being a major concern. I think migration lines up a little bit with security in what we're seeing. That it's obviously a big hurdle. It's obviously a challenge, but it's not stopping companies from going into the cloud. 3 years ago, I think it was. I think we saw security and the ability to make that first migration as being hurdles that a lot of companies weren't ready to overcome, and now they're getting more comfortable with it, and so I think they're getting over those hurdles. They still need a lot of help because, like I said, it is a big challenge, but I think they're willing to try to take it on and try to get to where they know they need to be with cloud-enabled architecture.
Agreed, and I think, by having the solution provider partner be able to present the alternatives up front and really show the end customer the user experience and the features and functionality by app, it helps to create more of a comfort level in advance of the migration. And we're seeing that, we're facilitating and helping partners to do that selection and identification process and feel comfortable themselves with these products.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's move to the next slide.
Okay. Great. So like I said before, the build model out of the 4 that we have described is very hardware-based, and there's really not that much of a SaaS play there. But all the other models do incorporate SaaS or touch SaaS. Right? So when it comes to provide provision, we ask channel firms, what types of applications are you dealing with when you're reselling these or getting them into your customers' hands? And you can see here there's a decent match to the list that we had before of what companies are using. I think that some of the shuffling here is due to the complexity. So when you have something like business productivity apps or email, I think customers are starting to have a notion that they can go direct to the vendor with that. And maybe in some cases they're going to run into some issues that will then require some support. But I think they are at least exploring those options. Whereas something like data analytics or the virtual desktop or building out your storage solution, I think these are more complicated things. And I think these are the things that a company recognizes that they need help with. And so they're not quite as quick to go direct and get the application and then try to plug it in themselves. I think they're looking for that level of support and that level of getting off the ground with it, especially if it's something brand new to them, and data analytics would be a great example there. There are so many analytics solutions out there now, and so many firms, especially in the SMB space, that just don't have a lot of practice with analytics, and so this can really give them a boost, but they have to know how to use it. And so you can see a little bit of data over on the right-hand side. Those firms that identify themselves as being fairly mature with their cloud offerings, a decent number are selling data analytics. They see that as a profitable and a growing business. And so we think that there's a lot of opportunity there even going forward. The largest channel firms are have more experience reselling the business productivity. They probably have that customer base, and they've built up sort of a reputation as being that provider of IT solutions, whereas the smaller companies might be a little more project-based, and they've got some opportunity to be that one-stop shop and try to be that primary person anyway that's offering IT solutions, and maybe step into the stream there instead of having their customers go direct when it comes to business productivity. And then email is a very popular solution. There have been a lot of channel firms that have gotten into hosted email, and we could certainly have an argument about what is the difference between cloud and hosted. I think a lot of hosted providers have just transitioned to saying that they are cloud providers now, and I think that's fine. I think that for their end users, they are still meeting the need, and there's not a need to move to a full cloud solution at this point because their clients really don't need that. And so I think a lot of clients are still looking for, something like email to not be a core competency of what they do. They would like to have that outsourced to someone else, and so they're going to some email specialists.
Interesting. We're also seeing that there are a lot of CRM firms these days to install and implement and design optimal CRM programs and implementations.
Yeah, that's interesting. It doesn't crop up on our list here, but I wonder if that's just one that we didn't ask as much about because it hasn't been as strong traditionally within the channel. So it might be an area to look closer at.
Yeah, I think so. I think it will probably become more a part of the channel, but that the people who are in that sector come from the marketing sector. And so it's an opportunity and an example of how the channel is expanding.
Yeah. So moving to the enable integrate model, you can see that this model is more popular with the larger channel firms. The smaller channel firms don't offer this quite as much, and that's a little bit of a resource statement. I think that this is a more complex model than something like the provide provision model, and so it does require a little bit more resource and expertise, but I think it also highlights an opportunity. I think the smaller channel firms are probably dealing with smaller end users, and I think that as those end user needs become more complex, this need for integration is going to continue to grow. And so we think that this is something that we're hoping to see some smaller channel firms begin to explore, begin to find some good success stories and some ways that they are doing this, and then share that out with the entire community. When we talk about the types of activities that happen in this enable integrate model, and we try to match those up with what could happen in a SaaS world, we see that firms are offering customization of cloud solutions when the solution out of the box maybe needs a little bit of tweaking. They're offering their own application development, which is a really interesting area inside the channel now, because the channel itself, once you move past the vendor, has not traditionally had very strong software skills. And now with so many things being software-based and having APIs and that being the method that you're using for so much integration, we're seeing more development become more critical. Integrating multiple cloud solutions together is obviously an area of need. Even as customers might choose to go direct for these point products, they probably don't have the knowledge necessary to tie them all together. Mobile application development goes right in line with application development, and mobility and the cloud certainly go hand in hand. So many companies are moving to the cloud because they want to make those systems accessible by the mobile devices that all their employees have. And in a lot of cases that requires some application development at that mobile device level. And then just pure and simple deploying the cloud solution. So taking one cloud application and getting it plugged in, integrated, and up and running for a company is something that firms are helping with.
Okay, great.
All right, and then finally is managed support. So this is the long game, and this is where companies come in and they're trying to offer those services long term for their clients as the needs change and as the business moves forward. And so you can see a list of things here that these companies are doing, whether it's migration between clouds as companies are getting into those secondary migrations, consulting on what type of cloud model is best for what application or workflow, the management that we discussed, looking at cost, which is another challenge. All of these things you can see have changed a little bit year over year, and the troubleshooting on a project basis is the one that declined. Everything else is kind of growing and moving forward, and so this opportunity to stay engaged and keep a relationship and continue providing a service to your client is something that a lot of companies are having success with. So with that, we'll wrap up here with a few takeaways. So if you are a SaaS vendor, plug into the IT channel. We talked a little bit before about the fact that there's a lot of new vendors out there that are starting up with new solutions because of the new models that we have, and they're looking to get engaged with the IT channel. And SaaSmax and CompTIA can help with that. That's what we exist to do. And the channel is a great model that's been in use for decades now, and it looks to be a strong model going forward. So we're certainly encouraging vendors to become channel friendly. Build your product with integration in mind, because we've talked about it through the whole webinar how this is a huge challenge, and I think the number that typically gets cited is that integration is about 7 times the cost of procurement. So you can go out and procure a solution and have budget allocated for that, but if you don't have quite a bit more budget in either dollars and energy allocated to integrate that product, then you're going to have a tough time of it. And the easier you can make your product to plug in with different things that a company may already be using, the better it will be. And then finally, think about what your operation will look like, how your application runs between a public cloud and a private cloud. There are some differences here, and your application may actually live in both places for a single customer, and they may choose to cloud burst if the workload gets too high and have it installed in a private cloud but then burst up to a public cloud if they need to. There are obviously integration challenges with whatever is living on-premise, but if you're a SaaS vendor, you're building an application that wants to live in a cloud environment, and so that's going to be either public or private or both, and there are some differences there that you'll want to consider. And then if you're a SaaS partner, the flip side of the channel argument there is to seek out new vendors. We talked before about the churn that partners are going through and the fact that they're trying to increase their portfolio of vendors that they're working with. And it can be a challenge to go out there and find the right vendors. But again, SaaSmax and CompTIA exist to try to make that matchmaking as simple and successful as possible. So do look for those new vendors and do some of your own research in trying to find those companies to work with. Secondly, help clients consider the applications that they haven't used before. Because cloud is offering more resource to people at a more affordable price point, then smaller companies especially can start to move into a space that they couldn't be in before, and they can start to have new capabilities and new ways of doing business. So rather than just considering moving an existing workflow into the cloud, think about changing that workflow and think about changing the way that your clients do business. And then finally, think about the long term and try to set yourself up to have that ongoing relationship and to capture that recurring revenue because you are engaged with them, you're helping them do much more than a single cloud transition. You're helping manage their overall infrastructure. So I hope that this was helpful. Dina, I don't know if any other questions have come in.
Excellent. The one question that came in was from actually the CEO of Cloud Assurance, and he wanted to know your thoughts on whether or not security is now less of a barrier to cloud adoption these days.
Yeah, I think that less of a barrier, but I think it's still just as much of a problem to solve. I think that a lot of companies didn't want to move because they were concerned about security not being adequate. And what I would say is that those companies have probably gotten to some level of comfort that security can be made adequate in the cloud. And so it's not stopping them from going into the cloud, but as they make that transition, and in some cases, after they've made that transition, they're still asking the question of, how can we make this security be what we want it to be? And I think that that continues to be a challenge. I think there are still some companies that are recognizing that a cloud provider is going to give a certain baseline of security, and if your security needs are greater than that baseline, then it's typically up to you to close that gap. And so end user companies are learning to ask the right questions, and then they're still accepting that cloud is the best model, and they're figuring out what they need to do to close that security gap and use a cloud solution.
Okay, great. If anyone has any other questions, please feel free to type them in. I wanted to touch briefly upon the conversation of integration that you mentioned, because we recently, SaaSmax has a partnership with IBM for one of their products that they call Cast Iron, which is an API integration solution. And SaaSmax has a very special no upfront pricing plan that we can offer to vendors and partners who are looking to create integration or either with their SaaS solutions or with on-premise and SaaS solutions. So if anyone is interested in learning more about that, definitely let us know or check out the descriptions on our marketplace site. And then also, I wanted to share that we do have another amazing event coming up along the lines of our Crossing the SaaSm series with TechIsle CEO Anurag Agarwal, called Real Data on How SaaS Vendors in the Channel Are Missing Out on SMB Sales Opportunities. So we encourage you to come to that as well. But let me see, if there are any other questions, please let us know now. But this was a really excellent presentation, Seth, and we thank you so much for bringing this to us and to our community. And again, for those of you who are interested in sharing it with your colleagues, please let us, we'll be posting this in our blog called Why SaaS, as well as forwarding it around. Okay, we are getting some questions in now. One of them is as such. Do you have tools that will help SaaS companies to make mobile for iOS? Okay. Actually, SaaSmax has some tools on our marketplace that can do that also through the IBM product line. So absolutely feel free to talk to me about that after this webinar. And no other questions at this time. So fantastic. So Seth, thank you again so much. We may have an encore presentation of this in either late December or January, but the material was very relevant. We appreciate your being here and sharing it with us. And thank you all for coming to this, this great presentation. And again, if you want to contact anyone through SaaSmax, feel free to do so at either myself directly at Dina, D-I-N-A, at SaaSmax.com, or if you want to reach Seth, we'd be happy to forward you to him. And have a great day. And Seth, thank you again. And we'll say goodbye at this time.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Seth. Take care. Bye-bye, everyone.